Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Power Storytelling Podcast. I'm Kat Abraham, and today with us we have Garrett Mireles.
Hi.
Thanks so much for joining us, Garrett.
Thanks for having me.
A little background on Garrett. He attended the University of Texas at Austin and graduated with a BS in advertising from the Creative Advertising program with a specialization in copywriting. And he is currently located in New York City working as a copywriter for Thimble.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay,
that
Garrett.
is all. That all checks out. Yeah.
Okay, the background is true.
Yes.
Good to know. Good to know.
Cool.
So, if you could start off by telling our audience, I guess, what a copywriter is and what you would do in a normal non-pandemic setting.
Yeah. Thankfully, my job is pretty similar in a non-pandemic and pandemic setting. But the best way to explain copywriting, I think, is all of the words that you see in marketing and advertising. So whenever you see a billboard, like the words on a billboard, or like slogans like "just do it," those are words that were come up with by copywriters. Or if you're watching a commercial and you think a commercial is really funny, the people who write the scripts for commercials are copywriters. Names of products like Clorox and Windex and Band-Aid, like those were all things that were come up with by copywriters. So it's basically like taking words and making them useful for marketing and advertising, whether that's names of products, scripts, taglines, that kind of stuff that you see like all around you in the world.
Okay, well, that's like a really kind of specific profession. What led you into that? Have you always wanted to be a copywriter, or is it something you discovered?
Really good question. And I will answer the second part of your question about what my job looks like on the day-to-day at Thimble. So Thimble is a tech startup. It's like very small. It's 25 people. My job before this was also in tech. And so being a copywriter in tech means that I work a lot on the words, like I said, words on a billboard or like words in commercials. Working in tech means I write a lot of the words that are in our app. Like we have an app. And so like whenever you download an app and you read the description in the app store, and then like you're tapping through and you're learning how to use the app and the way that it explains the buttons and all that stuff, is a lot of what I do. And I do write scripts for commercials and do the other like regular things, but specifically working in tech means I work a lot on like product copy, and our product is an app. So that is pretty much the same whether I'm in an office or working from home, because it's all pretty much reading and writing. That's what I do all day. And
that's good in these times.
Yeah. And you asked if I knew that I always wanted to be a copywriter. And the answer is no, I think. But I've known for a long time. Like I knew when I was younger, I think like freshman year of high school, for a while I thought I wanted to be an English major, because my favorite class, probably not surprising, but my favorite class was always English. I loved reading, I loved writing. And so I thought like maybe I'll be an English major, but I didn't know that there was a ton else out there. Like I didn't know what the other options were, but I always knew too that I was really interested in like pop culture and media. I'm a huge music nerd, like big like pop music fan. So that was always interesting to me. I was like obsessed with like watching music videos and MTV and like just like keeping up with like what was going on in like pop culture. So I was always curious about how to combine like a love of reading and writing with pop culture. And there are like so many options out there, but for me, it became sort of clear that I wanted to study advertising, because it is like this balance of like reading and writing, like more like the technical elements of it and how it like influences popular culture. And so that is where I got the decision to be an advertising major and be a copywriter. And I knew that pretty early on. It's actually, I guess, younger than most people typically say that they like figured it out. But I knew like probably as early as my freshman year of high school, I had decided I was like, I'm going to go to UT Austin. I'm going to be in the Texas Creative Program, and I'm going to be a copywriter, and I'm going to live in New York. And so I like had a very one-track mind about it. And I have learned a lot about that along the way. But did sort of decide pretty early on.
Yeah. Do you think, like you said, having a one-track mind, how do you think that's motivated you, or I guess helped you? And I guess you said you learned a little bit about that. What have you learned?
Yeah, I think I think in a lot of ways, it definitely did help me like say yes and no to particular things and basically like be really, really fixated on one path. So like I was always obsessed with getting into UT. Like it was the only thing that like mattered to me. Like I was only going to apply to UT. And then I was not an automatic admit. Like I was not in the top at the time. It was 10% of my graduating class from high school. And so I didn't have a backup plan. And my mom was like, okay, stupid. You have to apply to like at least one backup school. But that's how committed I was to like really wanting to go to Texas. And so I think that it helped me have like a thing in the distance that I was always like working toward. And which is really gratifying because now I am like working full time in New York as a copywriter and doing the thing that I set out to do like 8 years ago or 9 years ago. So that is great. I think just within that, I've learned that there are so many ways to find happiness that aren't in like your goals and in work, and you don't have to like obsess over it. And oddly enough, the less you obsess over it and the more you just like let it happen organically, typically the more successful you are. I find like if you become so obsessed with one thing that you don't keep an open mind, you close yourself off to too many opportunities to learn. And you also don't stop to smell the roses, you know, like people who, I can say for myself, people who obsess over having a 4.0 in high school or in college because they think that that is like the key to success. It's like, I must have a 4.0, like this number on this piece of paper is the only thing that matters. Those people often are the ones who don't hang out with their friends and they sacrifice social life and they sacrifice some of the other things that are also rewarding to you and also help you develop professionally because they are so fixated on one thing. So I will say like, it's really great to have like an intention. Like I said, like in the distance, I always knew that I wanted to be a copywriter. There were, of course, times along the way that I questioned that, but that was kind of always the plan. And so it was nice to have that intention, but I did other stuff. I did a lot of other stuff in college, especially that and high school that I did for myself. Like I was in theater in high school because it was a thing that I loved doing. And it didn't matter if it was like good for my like resume.
It probably was good for your resume too.
Yeah. I mean, it was the thing that helped me, you know, develop into a good public speaker, which is also beneficial to my career. So it's like, you know, there's, in college, I was in all the like clubs and organizations that I wanted to be in. I studied abroad because that was really important to me. Like I did things that maybe on paper seemed like they were not directly serving like the goal of becoming a copywriter, but they made me a better, like more well-rounded person. So,
which just prepares you better for life in general.
Yeah, exactly. Like having those life experiences, being exposed to new places, new people, all stuff that I can say like tangibly 100% has helped me in my career. So working on other aspects of yourself besides just what's on paper can also pay back dividends.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, in a couple other conversations, you just described your college experience as humbling, which I think is a really honest word for a lot of people. And I resonate with that. Can you, I guess, expand on that a little bit?
Totally. So I think a lot of people, if you go to a school like UT Austin or college in general, you know, very few or less than the majority of Americans get to go to college. And so if you have been in positions of privilege that have allowed you to be at the place where you're able to go to college like on time with other people by the time you turn 18, a lot of the time you have not experienced very much failure in your life, at least in like your academic life. And I'm sure you experienced this when you got to UT. Like it's most people were, for, you know, all the different kinds of qualifications that there are, like you were usually the top of something. Like I was student body president of my high school. There are a lot of I met plenty of valedictorians, and everyone comes to UT and is a valedictorian or captain of their dance team or, you know, whatever, quarterback and all these people. And so you come to a place with all these other high achievers, and it's like, if everyone is up here, then it lowers the playing field again. You're all normal, you know, you're no one is exactly like no one is exceptional anymore, really. And so that is really jarring for a lot of people when you go to college, especially a school as big as UT Austin. So I definitely had that experience at least a couple of times where I had always, in high school, had always gotten into every club, every organization. I was in honor society and student council. I did everything I wanted to do. Like, it was never like a question of whether or not I could. And then I got to college and applied for stuff. Like, I was applying for like the student government of the communications school and thinking, I'm the most qualified person in the world for this. Like, I was, in student government in high school. I got into UT with flying colors or whatever. I'd convinced myself that I was, the center of the universe. And then I didn't get in. That was like fall of my freshman year. And I was like shocked. I was like, how me? I was like, how could you possibly like not let me into this thing? And I think what that taught me was, one, it's important to know your value. It's important to know that you do have unique and special characteristics, but you're not better or more deserving of an opportunity than anyone else because of the privileges that you have. And I think it also taught me throughout college, like as I started to like get more focused on the things that really, really mattered to me, it helped me learn what was important to me, like as opposed to just like casting this huge net. Like freshman year, I was in like as many clubs as I could be in, because that is what I thought defined success, was being really busy all the time. But as college went on, I started to like think way more critically about the things that really mattered to me, where I really felt like I belonged, or I really felt like I was making a difference. And so by the end of it, that meant like leaving all of the other organizations that I was a part of and like only focusing on the admissions program at UT and like being a UT tour guide. And because I was a UT tour guide for all 4 years of school, like I got in as a freshman and was on the exec team and just helped like contribute to the program, I guess, the way that it runs now. And so that became like the thing. I was like, okay, like if I'm not going to like waste my time really like doing things that I'm not passionate about, like I'm going to be able to like invest way more of it into this thing that really brings me a lot of fulfillment. So that is
the craziest thing that's ever happened on a tour.
Craziest thing that's ever happened.
Tour stories.
To me, thankfully, not that much, but one of my like fellow tour guides from my same class, like my same recruiting class, she was, I think, getting her first tour ever. And she finished it and she was obviously really nervous. And a woman was like coming up to her to say thank you and saying, thank you so much for the tour. Like, we really appreciate it. And her tooth flew out of her mouth at my friend. And we had these like mesh polos. And so the tooth like got stuck in her shirt. And so she had to like negotiate, like, do I pull the tooth out for you, or do you take your tooth out of my shirt? Like, and that was like her first tour. So some interesting times.
That's a story I don't know if I'll be able to forget. So I appreciate that.
Interesting times touring UT Austin's campus.
Yeah, seriously, I can only imagine. But so as you're saying, like you were really involved in everything your freshman year, and then somehow you like stumbled into one of the hardest programs to get into on UT's campus, the creative advertising program. And so from what I understand, it's a very kind of competitive program. It's a no joke atmosphere.
Yeah.
How did you handle that? Because I feel like if I was placed in that, I'd be like, oh, whoa, like slow down. Like, how did you, as a young adult, kind of navigate being in that environment?
Yeah. I'll talk a little bit about what the program is first, and then how my experience in it went. So the Texas Creative Program is a portfolio program within the advertising program at UT. So I decided I wanted to study advertising and be a copywriter. And when you get into the advertising program as a freshman, everyone is on the same playing field. You're just kind of like a general advertising major, and you take intro classes and kind of figure out what you want to do within the program and within the industry. So there are 3 different tracks within the advertising school. It's basically general advertising, what they call like account planning, media, which is like learning how to make the budgets and buy the space where advertising is placed. So like when you hear about the Super Bowl and a 30-second Super Bowl commercial costing $2 million, media buyers are the people who typically set those prices, work for clients, and help get, Pepsi that placement or whatever it is. So that is like the second branch of the advertising industry and the program. And then third is creative. So creative is what you see on the ads. When the media people buy the 30-second commercial for Pepsi, the creative people decide, that Cardi B is the main character in the commercial and all the things. So that's how the three branches of the advertising program work at UT. And the creative track is the one that I was in. It's application based. So media and creative are two that they accept a certain number of people every semester. You go through like a very regimented like curriculum where you are learning really, really detailed information about that specific thing. Like I took media planning classes, I took account planning classes, but the majority of my time was spent learning about creative. And so, and the other tracks are like that too, but for their own like expertise. So that is how the program works. Like you said, it is very intense, very competitive. Thankfully, recently they've changed some of the like rules around how it works and the structure to make it easier on students. But it was definitely very old school when I was a part of it. I got into the creative program the fall of 2017. Fall of 2016, something like that. Anyway, I got into creative, and it's, I think it's 6 hours a week of class, and basically just learning how to make an ad, learning how to improve your graphic design skills, improve your copywriting skills, and working on advertising campaigns all the time. So you learn a lot about
advertising campaigns themselves as students.
Mm-hmm. So it's all like pretend. It's what we call spec work. So essentially, like if you're in the creative program, you get to choose the brands that you work on, and you say like, I want to make ads for Coca-Cola, Nike, Apple, Google, etc. And so you come up with an idea for what you think an advertising campaign should look like for that brand, and something that like hasn't been done before, that's interesting, that's creative, and you work with your professors and they give you feedback, and your classmates give you feedback, and you essentially put together what you think is a good idea for sort of like a pretend advertising campaign. So you're creating like, this is what we think the billboard should look like. This is what we think the magazine ad should look like. This is what a commercial would look like for them. And you create it all, and it's basically bundled all together, and you present them to like real world creative directors at the end of every semester. And so you have like a big design review, and they give you feedback in front of everyone. And that is how it goes. Does that make sense? Is that like a good description?
That makes sense.
Okay.
You don't mind me asking, what were some examples of things that you did in the program? Because I think it's so interesting.
Yeah. My very first campaign that I ever worked on was for Teen Vogue, because that was like 3 or 4 years ago when Teen Vogue was like especially like hot, like it had just become like very political again. And so I was really interested in a magazine that made politics accessible to young people. And so I worked on a campaign like speaking about how teen magazines, teen content is not only pop culture and makeup and that kind of stuff. Like it also, there was a place for conversations around politics and current events. And so that's one of the things that I worked on very, very first. And then throughout it, I worked on stuff like Trader Joe's. I worked on U-Haul, which was actually really interesting. Some local businesses in Austin, which was cool because we get to know the founders and stuff. And so got to do a really wide range of things, which is good for a well-rounded portfolio, which is like the end goal of being in a portfolio program, is to have all this time where you're really just focused on building like this big body of work that you can go after you graduate and show people like, I know how to make an advertising campaign. Give me a job in advertising. So that's the kind of stuff I worked on.
So all of this led you to New York, especially during this crazy time.
Yeah.
How was that transition from one big city to another?
The transition to New York was easier than I think most people have it, because I was really familiar with the city before I moved here. For the summer after my sophomore year of school, I interned here. So I interned. I lived in Brooklyn, in a different neighborhood that I live in now, but I lived in Brooklyn and was a copywriting intern at a really small company. So very similar to like what my life looks like now. But did that my summer of sophomore year and got to live in New York for like 3.5 months and understand how the subway works and all of the ins and outs really of the city. And so that was like my first real huge exposure to New York. And I had never been, the first time I went to New York was the summer after my senior year of high school, and my mind was blown. I was like, this is the craziest place. I had saved up my money. Like I worked a job in high school and saved up money for like a year to pay for me and my mom to be able to go to New York. And so that's when I like really fell in love with it. And then I came back for the summer after my sophomore year of college. And then just like by nature of the advertising program, a lot of people that like go to UT Austin, because it's a really good advertising school, will go to New York after. And so all my friends, like 95% of my friends had moved here by the time I was here. And so throughout junior and senior year of school, I came back to visit. Like I would come like over winter break and just stay with my friends and find time to come back. And then finally decided to move last winter. So, yeah.
So before you mentioned how through your personality being kind of one track, it's important that you learned it's important to stop and smell the roses. So I guess in the midst of the pandemic and kind of being new to New York City, what have your roses been?
That's a great question. I have really loved learning how to slow down. I think I graduated from school and I had started a job. Like I was basically working full time before I graduated. And so I was during my senior year, like working full time and finishing class. I started immediately after graduation. I worked at a company called Bumble in Austin. And so I worked there for like all total about a year. And that was definitely a grind. It was like very, very busy. And it was the summer after college. And I was like learning how to adjust to that. And then made the decision to come to New York. And so I came to New York and was working on getting a job here. And so I got a job and then started my job and coronavirus started. And it's just like, it has been a hectic like year and a half. If not all of college being pretty hectic, just because I really liked to keep super busy all the time. But kind of like what I was saying about learning how to like pare down the things that were important to me and really, really invest in a few things and making those really matter as opposed to like just running around. I am trying to sort of extend that now into like adult life, because immediately there are more things for you to worry about. Like after you graduate college, like most people have student loans to pay off, or you have your parents aren't, if they were helping you before, they're not helping you anymore really. And so there are a lot of other stressors that come up like when you graduate from school and thinking about your career and what's next and blah, blah, blah. So have taken the time throughout quarantine really to like reevaluate what is important to me and rest and get enough sleep and exercise and read books for fun, because I never really did that before. Outside of copywriting, I'm also really into songwriting. And so I've been like, just like as a fun thing for myself for now, songwriting in my free time, stuff that I never did before, because I was like, I think a lot of people, if you are ambitious, like, you know, if you're a high school kid or about to enter high school and you're thinking like, I want to go to the best college, I want to do X, Y, and Z, I want to leave my small town and go to a big city, like all this stuff, you convince yourself that you have to like break your back, basically like overcommitting yourself to things in order to make that happen. And in the process, you can kind of burn out. And for me, this has been a time of like reevaluating that, avoiding burnout when I can, trying to take care of myself and like have a more balanced life. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that does. I love that, and that's been one of my favorite things throughout this whole process. Is just like seeing all these uber accomplished people I know, like on Twitter, doing something like crocheting and like doing all these like crazy cool crafts and learning new hobbies and being reinvested in other things, and I love that part of all of this.
It's awesome. I mean, there are obviously some really unfortunate downsides and really tough problems that the world is facing right now. But I think if you do have the luxury of like being able to like rest, it is a really restful time.
Yeah, it can be for sure.
For sure.
So if you were to give advice to someone in high school or a little younger that is wanting to get into advertising or copywriting or living in New York, what advice would you give them?
Start saving your money right now. If you want to live in New York and you're 13, open a savings account. But I think one of the best things that you can do, no matter where you're from, no matter where you live, is to just start cataloging your references. So like what that means for me is like, I'm like I just told you, I'm from Beaumont. Before we started the podcast, I'm from Beaumont. It is a small town outside of Houston. And I went to school basically my whole life in a town outside of Beaumont. So like the middle of nowhere. And it's in a town called Sour Lake, Texas. It's literally one stoplight. It's like 1 square mile. And we got a subway my senior year of high school. And it was like the biggest deal ever. So I grew up in a very small town, a place where we like hardly had foreign language classes. We hardly had like AP classes. Like the course offering was very limited. My graduating class was really, really small. And so the times I've gone back to my high school, people ask like, how did you get into advertising? Like people from where we're from, like work at oil refineries and sell insurance. Like how do you go like into, the world of like media and entertainment? And the truth is that media and entertainment are the things that touch everyone's lives in this country. And so for you to work up to, having a career in those things, I think the easiest place to start is in front of your TV, in front of your computer, learning what you like and what you don't like, and what is funny to you, what's entertaining to you, and finding ways to catalog that. So like for me, I was in middle school during like the renaissance of Tumblr and like the Tumblr days. So I was really into that and like, blogging on Tumblr, like collecting images and videos and stuff that I thought was cool to me. I did watch a lot of TV. And those are things that allowed me, even before I had, what seems like all these like amazing opportunities for access, like being in this portfolio program, being in the #1 advertising program in the country, living in New York, internships in New York. I wouldn't have had any of those things if I didn't start in my bedroom, just learning, what I liked, finding my voice, especially if you're going to be a creative, like understanding your voice and copy, your visual style. That's the kind of stuff that comes from having a really, really wide reference base of everything from watching cartoons to watching the Food Network to watching, whatever else is out there, to prepare you basically to make good work like when the time comes. So that I think is a great place for anyone to start. If you have any interest in like working in entertainment or media, advertising, PR, stuff that seems really glamorous and far off and hard to access. The truth of the matter is that the product of like what that does is like go to TVs and computer screens all over the country. So like it's right in front of you if you look for it. And advice for moving to New York. I mean, I think it is really nice to, if you can in college, find an opportunity to come here for a long period of time. Because I think in theory, a lot of people are either like, I would love New York or I would hate New York. Like it's a very polarizing place. But most people who either say, I love New York or I hate New York, have only ever been to Times Square because that's where you go when you're on vacation. And being able to live here for a significant period of time, live in an apartment, take the subway to work, that kind of stuff gives you a better feel for really what it's like. And so like now people ask me, they're like, oh, like, do you see Broadway shows all the time? Or like, do you go to Yankees games every weekend? And I'm like, no, I go to CVS and the grocery store and I go home. So it is a more normal place than people expect. So that's my advice for living in New York. To try to, if you can, try to spend some time here before you make the jump. And advertising media stuff is right in front of you. Good answers.
So kind of a final question. Before you said you were kind of a media fiend. What I feel like media is becoming a really important way for people everywhere to learn about different topics, especially in like this moment. As someone that's creating that media and has a part in mobilizing it, what do you see media becoming and advertising becoming in the future? And now, at least my media, what I'm seeing, it's becoming more educational, and I'm learning a lot from what I'm seeing online. Like, what do you expect from media in the future, kind of?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think especially given the past like few months, I think more than ever, brands having a stance on social issues has become like table stakes. Like now it's expected that everyone has a diversity and inclusion policy. Everybody has some sort of community initiative that's beyond like just your bottom line. And so I think that is the present of advertising and marketing is really like expecting people to, in entertainment companies, media, PR, journalism, blah, 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 expecting some effort on the part of companies like that to give back and make things more equal. So that's for one. I think like in an increasingly digital world, like people live in completely different corners of the internet, like if you are on TikTok, like when you ask your friends, you're like, oh, like what corner of TikTok are you in, or what side of TikTok are you on? Because on your side of TikTok, something could be like the biggest trend, the funniest joke, the most viral thing in the world. And then you make a reference to it to somebody who's not on the same side of TikTok as you. And they're like, what are you talking about? So, and that's somebody that lives in your same city that has typically the same like social patterns as you. Like it's even in like places where your demographics are like very homogeneous, like you're still seeing a huge diversity in the kinds of content that people are consuming. And because of that, advertising is becoming increasingly more personalized and granular and specific. And so there's just going to be like, I think a continual like segmentation of like really, really narrow, like different channels, like whatever you're interested in online, whether it's fashion or beauty or food or, travel or whatever it is, like you're going to like start to see ads that are probably even more tailored to that thing. And so you get kind of like put in these more and more narrow streams. And so, I mean, for a marketer, it's a bigger segmentation challenge, like learning how to write and speak to all these different kinds of audiences, as opposed to just saying like, just do it and everyone being like, that sounds good and buying it. Like you have to learn how to like really tailor a message to very specific consumers. And so that makes my job more interesting and harder.
Yeah, more challenging.
Yeah.
So I think that's, I guess towards the future is a perfect place to end the pod today. But thank you so much for coming on and teaching us all about what you do in copywriting. We so appreciate it.
I would say too, one more thing, just because any opportunity I have to like talk to young people about it, like advice for the future, or just like words of wisdom, I guess, for the future, it would be that it does get better. I grew up very closeted, very gay in a small town where I felt very misunderstood and didn't think that there was anyone else like me out there in the world. But now, well, starting in college and then now living in New York, the friends that I made there really allowed me to be my full self. And so I would not be the person that I am without my friends and those experiences, and it will get better if you feel like that now. And like I said, it's part of like this journey of like, you know, finding what you're interested in, what you're passionate about, all the things, becoming more true to yourself. Being gay was a big part of that for me. And if there's anyone listening to this that feels that way, it will get better. It
does get better, and it always will. So
yeah,
that was
totally
very beautiful to end on. Thank you so much for coming on, Garrett. We so appreciate it.
Totally. Thank you so much for
all the amazing things you do and see all the amazing ads you create. So
thanks so much, Kat.
Thanks, everyone.